Uh, Again, good morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming and joining us for, I believe, the fifth annual Mario Bennekin Black History Symposium. And this is the fourth day. And today we have a treat. We have a presentation from our own Dr. Yolanda Franklin, our own, of course, Georgia State University Perimeter College, and also Decatur campus. She's a professor here. And so before we get started, I wanted to point out a few things and give a few housekeeping points. First, for our online audience, thank you for being here. And for those of you in the online audience, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat, and we will, when we get to Q&A, we will read whatever questions are there to be answered. And so I want to reiterate a point I made the other day about the importance of our commitment to Black History Month, and given the climate of the country, there are apprehensions about ending these kinds of programs. But let me say first, I am not the official spokesperson for Georgia State University, but I will speak as a professional, as a professor, and as an educator that that I, along with many of my colleagues, are committed to this programming, and especially to the Mario Bennekin Symposium. And it will be here as long as we're here, right? But I also want to reiterate that the threat to this kind of programming is not, the greatest threat is not those external forces, those backward folks who are anti DEI, anti-diversity, we need to say those words out loud. I refuse to accept I refuse to accept that those are bad words and forbidden words. Don't give me that. Just like our ancestors were told abolition was a bad word, and that desegregation is a bad word. Now we say diversity, equity, inclusion is a bad word. No, not I, and neither should any of you be afraid to be committed to that. But the threat from external forces may be great, but the greater threat is our apathy and our inattention. And the greater threat is for us to become complacent with things as they are, for us to bend to the wave. That's the greater threat. Or even without that wave, for us to take our history and all of that for granted, and not take the responsibility of being the custodians for our story. That's the greater threat. So, I'm asking all of you to commit to supporting Black arts, Black history, Black community. So, and toward that end, one of the things that you can do is to support the Mario Bennekin Foundation that funds this symposium. And because one of the things I've always been complaining about is a lack of money, and we tend to sometimes it gets worse, they take away more and more, but if we fund the foundation, we will have the resources to do what we want to do. And so I encourage you to give to that foundation, so that we can fund and support our own things, and we don't have to worry about someone cutting off funds to anything. We provide our own funding. And so I ask you all to go to the website Tell your friends and tell people who have money. If you have a little bit of money that'll help, $5 would be nice. If we got $5 for every student, we would be great. We would do well. Um, if you know other folks, tell them to support the Mario Bennekin Foundation for the symposium support programming like this. It's very important that we commit to it, and because if we commit to it, we don't have to worry about who's going to stand against us. So I just want you to remember that. In the let me come out of this for just a second here. Minimize this. Before we, there is a survey code. I was trying to pull it up on the screen, but I'll try to do that later. But there is a code for those of you in the room. There is a QR code that you see on the table. I'm going to also put it on the screen at the end of the presentation. And you can use that QR code to, one, log in your presence here, but also you will be able to complete a survey that we ask that you complete that helps us with our programming in the future. So please do that just before you leave. Make sure you hit that code. For those of you at home, there should be a survey that you'll see when you log off, and please complete that survey. When I say at home, I meant those of you online. At the end of the presentation, when you sign out, there will be a survey. Please complete that for us. Okay, now that I've said all that, let us move on to our presenter. Our guest today, well, it's not a guest, she lives here, is Dr. Yolanda Franklin. And she's joined us on faculty as a limited term instructor. She's been here, I think, for a year, going on a year now. This is
my second semester.
Second semester, yes. So we're happy to have her. And folks, you need not sleep on the talent that you have before you. You know, we have some great, brilliant professors and people who pass through, people who've been here for years, and Dr. Franklin is a treasure. Let me tell you a few things about her. She's a poet and the author of Blood Vinyls, which Roxane Gay calls, quote, a must read. She's a four-time Fulbright Scholar Award finalist. Dr. Franklin is also a Cave Canem, Callaloo, and Vona Fellow. Her poems appear or are forthcoming in Frontier Magazine, Sugar House Review, Southern Humanities Review, and the Langston Hughes Review. Her poetry also appears in the anthology It Was Written, Poetry Inspired by Hip Hop. In addition, Dr. Franklin is a two-time recipient of the J.M. Shaw Academy of American Poets Award and a proud third-generation Floridian. She is currently on faculty here at Georgia State University's Perimeter College on the Decatur campus, where she teaches English composition and literature. Please let us welcome Dr. Yolanda Franklin.
Thank y'all so much.
Just back up for you.
The first thing Dr. Williams asked was, "Are you sure you want your stuff here?" And my reply was yes, so y'all can see it. Got my color purple bag. So we've got our Alice Walker representation today, and yesterday was Toni Morrison's birthday. So I'm thrilled and honored. I am so grateful for the audience representation, and the opportunity to be able to talk about the things I love, and about the literature and the people who wrote it, the woman in particular who wrote the literature I love. One of them, I get to talk about those things. So you can tell that I am a little stuffy. This is my first day out of the house in 4 days. Um, I did everything I could to make sure I was going to be here with you. So now I'm going to make sure if you can't hear me, just let me know. And I'm going to set my timer just to kind of keep track of things. Oh, okay. Can everyone hear me pretty well?
You're fine.
I'm good? Okay, awesome. All right. And I am told that in order for me to be seen, I have to stay stationary. Is that right? In this spot?
Kind of right in front of the screen.
Right here?
I can just see you at the edge.
Right here?
Yeah, that's perfect.
This is perfect. Okay. What if I lowered this? What would happen? Nothing?
You're right in it right now.
I'm right in it right now. Okay. So this is an interesting and uncomfortable framework. I am a person who, and those are the things that I like to work from, if you will. That's part of our discussion today. But I am a person that loves to move around. I'm very animated, if you will. Sleight of hand. Unlocking the ancestral lineage in Toni Morrison's Tetralogy. I am so surprised that so many people read this title and were like, I want to be present. There are a lot of words. Okay, so it's on, but it's not clicking. No problemo. I can manually click since I'm not allowed to move. All right, so for students who are familiar with the word trilogy, I know you've heard before, especially from the state I'm from, Florida. Disney rules the world, and then we have Marvel. So we've heard of several trilogies before, but here's just a slight reminder of what a trilogy is and what it means and what it represents. I have a link here, and this is interactive because I like to also have students have the opportunity to actually use your cell phones for academic purposes. There tends to be complaints from the elders in academic spaces, making sure that we chastise and admonish and redirect your usages. So this is a really cool opportunity for you to take a picture of the website link. I wanted to post it here. This link came out during the pandemic, but it's a really cool website that gives book reviews, which are particularly important in the world, and suggestions for books that we should read. And on this particular link, it gives a list of trilogies that are out in the world written by African writers. So why that's significant is because the trilogy does not reside solely in Greek mythologies and Greek literature. Okay, so it's interesting to see the scope of the understanding of it. So Toni Morrison first announced that her oeuvre encompassed a trilogy with the Paris Review. And when that dropped, and that issue online, the fall of I believe it says 93, the world went wild. We were all stunned. That means the super nerds like myself who love to read and who love to read Toni Morrison. We were like, there's a trilogy? Where is it? What do you mean? How can that be possible? But what's even more striking is the language she uses to describe the trilogy. She names the trilogy. She calls it the Beloved Trilogy. And I believe upon its first announcement in this publication, there are several people and scholars all over the world who read it as Beloved, the famous novel we may have heard written by Toni Morrison, was in a trilogy versus the title encompassing the text to create the trilogy is called the Beloved Trilogy. And it's also interesting because the language, the word choice, the diction for the word beloved is that beloved has multiple meanings. Beloved can also mean to be loved. one who is loved. Does that make sense? And so with that being something we are aware of with Morrison's creative license and talent with language, it then becomes even more significant after the announcement. So, a tetralogy, which is listed in the title, simply means there is more than one after 3. So it's 4. I am then suggesting that Morrison gave us tidbits in 93, and I believe that once we got her papers, which I'll talk a little bit about later, like what it means to get someone's papers and what that means, we then had a lot more time to spend and think about the possibilities of the announcement of 3 just as a small breadcrumb, as a hint, so that scholars of Morrison's work would actually get to work and figure out what that means and if there could be more. Okay, so Morrison is avid about telling us tidbits of advice, not just about writing and what it means to be a writer, but also for our personal lives. And I know that you see this quote here. She encourages making up stories. That's what I do and love, and that's what you are often encouraged to do. And a lot of the English courses you take here at GSU show us the narratives of the lives in which you have lived in that encouragement. And she does this in her work. Anyone who is devoted to creating a series, a trilogy that she announces, and I believe she's charging us to consider, it could be bigger than that, is absolutely devoted to language and the word. So, the trilogy, the beloved trilogy. It is traditionally discussed as being encapsulating beloved, jazz, and paradise. Those are the texts, and these are the date orders. Okay? So that's really interesting. And how it's described is that it really focuses each novel in the trilogy on a significant historical movement of African Americans. Why that's significant is this. African American people in the United States, okay, have a very significant and unique experience. What makes African American people different culturally than people who live in Africa is that people who live in Africa did not have ancestors and are not descendants of ancestors who survived the Middle Passage experience. That is the divide. That is why the peculiar and precarious situation of slavery and enslaving Black folks, African Americans, taking them from one continent in Africa through the transatlantic slave trade, and then bringing them to a country stripped of their language, their culture, their lifestyle, and their familiarity is significantly different than any other historical moment known to date. Understood? Okay. It is not what is being taught currently in the removal of DEI in the state where I am from in Florida. We, African American people in the United States, who are descendants of people who survived the Middle Passage experience, we are not immigrants. Okay? And African American history, Black History Month is American history. I want that to be very clear. So, contemporary scholars currently are discovering in conversation about this trilogy and trying to figure out what makes it a trilogy outside of significant historical movements of African American people in post the transatlantic slave experience, how it functions, what makes it a trilogy. Because when we consider trilogy in every other aspect, going back to the reference of Disney and Marvel Studios, if you will, there are common traits and common tenets that make a trilogy a trilogy. However, what we are learning is that the scholars seem to be having the same realizations, coming to the same conclusions in repetition. So we're going to kind of see what that's like, but I want to kind of show another image with the trilogy before we kind of get there. So these are the book jackets with the dates: Beloved, Jazz, Paradise, A Mercy. Upon preparing for this presentation, because this presentation is an adjunct to a bigger project that I'm working on, which we will discuss and I'll reference later, I've added love here just to keep your interest to kind of figure out what's going on. So now we have moved from full text, and then I have a ghost text, if you will, for the discussion, Morrison's novel, Love. So the scholars, Linda Peach is a famous scholar. These are some of the things that she's suggesting about the trilogy, each individual text, in an attempt to figure out what is the coagulant, what is making them dovetail, how are they merging to create what we understand for the tenets of a trilogy to me. So this conversation about the historical aspects and the saga of African American people. We've got Julie Carey Narad talks about the Morrison trilogy as three primary sociocultural movements being discussed in each of the texts, mentioning jazz as the Great Migration focal point in African American history and cultural traditions, the Civil Rights Black Power movement, and the historical time period of slavery. So it's really interesting that the conversations seem to sound very much in tandem, that all we can kind of see to tie this trilogy together are thematic, socioeconomic, historical commentary on the Black experience. Shirley Stay also talks about it as this definition and understanding what's different about Morrison's trilogy. She states that it's a conventional, typically historical saga. It's usually charting a sequential narrative through generations of the same family. So when we think about other movie trilogies, that is also what we think about, right? When you think Marvel, those characters, right, they're a family. Would you agree with me on that? And that is typically what we consider. But when we think about Beloved, and we think about Jazz, and we think about Paradise, when you read those texts separately, we don't see a through line, if you will, of a generational family. So the assumption then is that Morrison's trilogy consists of three very different novels. However, the through line seems to be elusive. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Sharon Jesse, there is no obvious continuation of a story. It's even a conversation with the critics. Tessa Roynan, Carolyn Denard, Eli Maury are other scholars that are absolutely saying similar messages. They're saying they're underlying and interconnected themes between all three. And Carolyn Denard also mentions that there are allusions to the Aeschylean theories as well, so other Greek tragedies, and that there are allusions to other historical events. I have even argued because of the way in which Morrison writes, she always starts with an image first. And for Beloved, she started with the image of a newspaper clipping of the Margaret Garner story. And this continues. There's a James Vanderdy photograph of a funeral for Jazz. There's a newspaper clipping about the Great Migration for the start of Paradise. And the story goes on and on. Could say the same about A Mercy. And in the poetic world, we call that ekphrastic or ekphrasis, meaning you start with an image and then you write from there. And Morrison has been quoted several times saying that she always starts with the image first. So that does give us some more insight and ways for new scholars to consider how we can see where this through line actually lies in the development of Morrison's trilogy, which I am arguing can be expanded. I believe, without doubt, it is definitely, at the very least, a tetralogy. And finally, the theme for all three books, from my point of view, is also love. As in, to be loved, it is called the Beloved Trilogy. So, just taking a look again at the books, arranged with love in the center. These are the publication dates. However, because we mentioned how each text focuses on a particular historical moment, there's also a chronological event. There's an ordering chronologically, which we will talk about, which you can kind of imagine if you've read any of Morrison's work. Most of us are familiar with Beloved, and that Beloved focuses on enslavement and slavery time period. But A Mercy, which is outlined in yellow, is actually the novel she writes after Beloved, and it focuses on the United States and the world before the invention of race as a concept. So, chronologically then, A Mercy would be a prequel to Beloved, and Jazz is set during the 20s and the Roaring 20s and the Harlem Renaissance, if you will. And then we have Paradise, which has also multiple viewpoints and time periods, but it is mostly settled in concrete times during the 70s. But that would take the entire time of this whole presentation to break down Paradise because of the techniques that are being used. But I will get to talk about some of them in order to solidify my point, if you will. And then love is in the middle. Now, this is where it's going to get really interesting. So, this slide is not going to work because it's going to be an actual video that I'm going to show you. And the online viewers, you will not be able to see it, but I'm going to tell you some information about how you can also view it. The slide is giving you most of the information to locate the particular text. And then I'm going to set it up so it'll take like just a second or two. I'm hoping I can just transition and play it for the people who are present with me. But the Pieces I Am is it's the second, and there are only two approved biographies, visual documentaries on Toni Morrison. This one is titled The Pieces I Am. It moves around. Currently, it's on Disney Plus. You can find it on Hulu. It moves around. The second one was done by the BBC, and it is also found online. You can find it on YouTube. Why I'm showing you this is because Morrison always starts with the image first. I'm rocking so that I can make sure I know where my things are. All right, so I'm going to switch. It's a quick listen, if that's a possibility. No? No? Is
Microsoft Word.
I could, well, no, I just wanted to show the video and do a switch. Is that, if it's too much, it's okay because I can talk about it. It's
Oh, the video's where?
on my,
On here?
yes,
Oh.
nope, it's okay. It's totally fine. I'll talk about it. Toni Morrison's birthday was yesterday. She will understand. We have had several conversations. All right, so let me be clear. I'm going to tell you what you will see. Got it? Okay. Princeton University is where Toni Morrison was astute and a cornerstone faculty for many years. When you are a famous writer, your papers retire with you, i.e. what you wrote. It's challenging for students to often learn this concept because hearing it sounds strange initially until I put it into a metaphorical framework. For example, we are not confused when a baseball player who is awesome is retired and then saved in the Hall of Fame. We are not confused when Tina Turner retired and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Your papers going to the university of your choosing often for your particular affiliation, examples include Alice Walker's papers are right here at Emory University. That is what happens to your papers. That makes sense? I don't know why I'm echoing. It's okay. All right. So everyone's clear on the papers. Okay. Why they're there is the same reason why we go to places that use the memorabilia to go visit and look at their jerseys. Understood? Okay. We writers and lovers of literature and language, we go to see their first drafts. We go to see what they mapped out. We go to see the papers. Does that make sense? That gives us insight into possibly understanding where the notes they have written during the writing period, right? And letters they've exchanged between other writers and editors, etc., can give us more information into how they created their artwork, okay? Well, the image I was going to show you is critical because there is one box in her papers that has a hand-drawn genealogy of her characters in her trilogy. And you see them for about 30 seconds on the pieces I am. And that's what I wanted you to see. She prefers to write with a specific named number 2 pencil on legal pad paper. For those of us who are super young, it is 11 by 17 paper. It is the color yellow. It looks just like the white paper you have, and it folds backwards. And I wanted you to see that, okay? The why is because that's as close as we could get today, virtually, to see those papers. You cannot access it online, any of the papers at Princeton. She set up provisions unless you register yourself and then you go in person. And when you go in person, you cannot touch the originals. They have specific duplicate copies for you to peruse through. No different than going to see in a museum Michael Jackson's glove. Am I wrong? Okay. Michael Jordan's first Nikes. Yeah? Okay. But I wanted you to see that. It's significant to see it also so that you can see that I'm not pulling this out of the air, that there is a genealogy. Is that cool? All right. We're going to go through it, skip it, because it wouldn't let me record the whole screen there. All right. I was able to find a few papers. They are not from the novels that I'm specifically speaking on that make up her trilogy that I'm believing is a tetralogy. However, there is a photo that I was able to locate of Dr. Toni Morrison holding that legal pad, writing on there. Can you tell I'm a poet and I had to describe the image before I showed it to you? Okay, perfect. Okay. How in the world could Toni Morrison be pulling this off? One of the tactics she's using comes from this idea. Because we understand that there are several African writers within the tradition of African writers that write trilogies and tetralogies, we then have a way in. And because we also know that Toni Morrison loves African writers, that there is influence. There are several texts about the Africanist presence in Morrison's work. She is always historically demarcating where we came from, who we are, and the evolution of our lived experiences, okay? And because she's doing that and paying homage to that reality, then Africa is always present. With that being the case, Afrofuturistic means that we are establishing, without beyond a shadow of a doubt, the term means that we are not just present and we clearly had a past, but we are also existing in the future. There are critics that are really doing some wonderful usages of language and creating new theories that I would like to talk to you about a little bit that are really helpful in understanding how Morrison is navigating this space. She is restoring Black temporal realities, restoring the realities. And this idea of the past doesn't die, the past doesn't disappear. Yes, the Middle Passage experience severed the unique and consistent representation and passing forward in remembrance as a daily practice of original African qualities and traditions that we experienced culturally before the Middle Passage experience. However, those things still live here in the United States. We know these things to be true. Mardi Gras, okra, seasonings. Does that ring a bell? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about this concept. It's called Black Quantum Futurism. I want to give you guys a second to kind of look at the slides. Their core principles come from an amalgamation of quantum physics and the temporal consciousness of the Black and African diaspora. Okay. Diaspora includes the Caribbean, includes other spaces, means wide, okay? So next to the language from the text here, breaking down what Black quantum futurism is, it's a real collective. It's a collective of Black intellectual thought rooted in science and methodologies to theorize African American literature. Particularly for Morrison, it is applicable. The image on the right is the African cosmogram. This is a diagram that has been passed along for so long, I don't even know its origin state. off the top of my head. It represents time lived and past life experiences. There's a line that runs across circles. So it's a circle with a cross in it. You see the 4 quadrants then break up. Awesome. It is interesting because the bottom is afterlife and the top is above life. I could spend 45 minutes breaking down this and talking about how daylight and the actual clock and time registers in these realms. It's so cool. Take some African American literature courses. But to get just an aspect of an understanding, to see it visually, and then put it next to what it means for Black quantum futurism is helpful in understanding the gravity and the nature of trilogy may be too small to talk about how Morrison is doing what she is doing. Okay. Some hints include references to Octavia Butler, the most famous Afrofuturist. Sci-fi is another term for the genre. African-American female writer. Kendrick showed her some tools and tricks about how space-time functions. Understood? BP time, Black people time. Understood? Black people running late. You saw me here exactly 2 minutes early. Does that make sense? Okay, great. That is a concept because time does not function the same way in our cultural understanding. It is a very much so Western concept. When you start to realize that chronology, Western chronology, when you remove those ideas and go to the African cosmogram and consider Black quantum futurism as a concept, understanding Morrison becomes limitless. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Dr. Keith Byerman, I have this quote here from the Toni Morrison Society site. I can't wait to meet him in person. I just love everything he had to say about paradise. It had this genuine quality about how in the world can I understand what Toni Morrison is saying and doing in this text. It is one of the most difficult ones. He says, try to work out the sequence of events, though. Like, there's so many things that happen. It is the novel in the trilogy that has the most number of characters. If we can put the events in their proper order, understood? Chronology, yes. Western concept, does that make sense? Okay. We maybe can figure out how things are related to each other. Not just things, but the people, the characters are related to each other. Of not being at home in their homeland, of being exiled in the place where they belong. That's for Morrison's The Foreigner's Home. African people, transatlantic slave trade, right? Middle Passage experience, plopped into a new world. Understood. The Foreigner's Home. Where is home? Morrison is also thematically talking about what home means and how we define it. Does that make sense? Okay. That's what we love about The Wizard of Oz so much. It makes the understanding of home as a place differently when we consider Black quantum futurism. We also have already considered home differently than just a static place because of Morrison's definition of rememory. And she defines rememory as when you run into a memory, walking around in your everyday life, doing things, and you bump into it. And then all these things start to come back to you. Even if those things that are coming back to you aren't the actual things that you alone specifically experienced. Because trauma, then therefore memory, is not only just collective, but it's also genetic, right? When then that is true, we have had those experiences. It's not unusual to consider that when you think Black quantum futurism. We have all been to an elderly parents, grandparents' place and looked at something and it felt familiar. It felt like you knew the story before you touched it. It felt like you knew the story before you got an opportunity to ask the questions about it. We have experienced that at some point. Oh, I'm going to go back. I'm going to make this point. She's very interested in what makes things possible. When you strip Western constructs of time, constructs of definitions of family, constructs of definitions of home, you see where I'm going with this? Then you start to be able to see connections and interconnectedness differently. For example, bloodlines, if you will. How many of us have experienced where you have a family member that you may call aunt or uncle and there is no actual bloodline? Yep. Or there is a bloodline and they don't have the title of brother or sister. It might be something different. Does that make sense? In naming and how we have a conversation about what that means. Does that make sense? Good. I'm doing good on time. Okay. Just a reminder. Thinking about those things with love in the middle. One of the ways in which I was so excited early on about discovering there was a genealogy, there is a genealogy in Morrison's novels. I learned this because my professor in college allowed us to read all of Morrison's text in chronological order by publication. And all of my friends thought I was nuts. And then we moved on to different parts of the world, still kept in touch, and then the pieces I am dropped. And I saw what I couldn't show you today. That legal pad with that genealogy, and I called every last one of them and let them know, I told you. There's other ways of seeing and other ways of knowing. And one of the whys is because it's always mama's baby and papa's maybe. You can have one character that's a man who has multiple partners and different children. You can have a woman who has multiple partners and different children, all to create a family. And when they move around to different places, yes? We have also heard of people, because we are people, when you move to a different city or a different place, sometimes you may invent a different persona. Yes? I mean, there were such things called fugitive slave laws. Am I wrong? Yes? Okay. There were things called black codes. Yes? There was something called Jim Crow. So when those terms that set restrictions upon how the black body can and cannot move, yes? The 13th Amendment, prisons, lynchings, pullovers, police stops, how does one both conceal and preserve one's identity? Sometimes you have to reinvent it. Would you agree that this is something you've heard of before? Okay, great. Definitely something Morrison is doing. Excuse me. Excuse me. Racial difference, so it creates a constant, right? It's a distortion of vision. Would you agree? This concept of race gives preconceived ideas. Does that make sense? So then people are portraying what they believe that means onto a subject. And then, so therefore, they're seeing what they want to see. Is that correct? Yes? Okay. So that gives us limitations as humans, but it also gives us possibility. So it's a phrase that I've often said, which is kind of sometimes you have to consider how to use your stereotype that's being held against you in your favor. And Morrison does that because she attempts to do things where she removes in several of her texts the codifications that we've been indoctrinated to about what defines race and gender. Does that make sense? Like, these are traits and examples of behavior that someone of this particular race would say and do, right? She removes a lot of those codifications intentionally to push back against that. And because that is the work she's doing, because the only race is the human race, and race is a social construct outside of being humans, all of us, that leaves room for Morrison to really play with language, to kind of bury like clues, right? Like we have to become a Nancy Drew, we have to become an investigator to figure out where the clues are, if you will. Okay, so and she mentions that women under these circumstances, we have to often rename ourselves, not just women, but also men, right? But she's really focusing on, because women, particularly through the thread of the time periods historically and culturally of the trilogy, aka Tetralogy, had to keep the children. Does that make sense? You have to reinvent yourself. Okay. What Morrison says about the language is that it must not sweat. So this is why it's so hard for us to figure out what the through line is. Where is the genealogy? Her commitment to the language and the power of it, right? Work against us, huh? It's how she's doing what she's doing. Okay? And love is right there in the center. Okay? The language has to be careful. And it is. She intentionally uses synonyms that aren't the ones we would initially come to mind for us to think about how to search for a character in a book. Okay? Like, she just removes those codifications that the concept idea of whiteness has trained us to understand, because it is necessary for race to exist outside of the human race alone. Does that make sense? Okay. So naming and renaming as an agency. Okay. Here's this little example about Joe Trace and jazz. The first time he's saying this as a character to us in jazz, he named himself for the first time. He's telling us the story, and he's talking about the disappearance of his parents. Is that not the experience of the Middle Passage experience? Okay. So they disappeared without a trace, and that's how Joe Trace gets his last name. Is that making sense? Okay. Which then means that's exactly why it's mama's baby and papa's maybe. Because now we have a matrilineal line. Most people have not heard the word matrilineal because you're used to the term patrilineal, which is when people marry. If there was a man marrying someone, there's this idea that one takes the man's last name. But every cultural tradition is not like that. Native American cultures, Latin American cultures, does that make sense? Okay. And we understand in a mercy, with all of with the amalgamation, the motley crew of character characters we have there, where they come from, right? Okay. We are not unfamiliar with hearing Native American tribes and survivors and witnesses of the African American transatlantic slave experience cohabitating, correct? Okay. So once I stopped looking, which I never really started, but just so we're clear, whenever I consider genealogy, I never start looking for the last name of the man. If you look for the mom, who usually keeps the children, then you can figure out the relationship, because she could choose to have more than one partner, and that keeps the line going. When you look, I am learning. And when I do that tool through Morrison's text, the genealogy starts to settle. It becomes crystal clear. So this is a version of blind spots. When she's talking about, so if you're looking for how the characters are related to each other, and you're looking for the families based on the mothers, and you're looking for the descriptors of who these people look like so that you can figure out where they are, because their names change. Sometimes you have to pay attention to how she describes their behaviors, because their behaviors are more indicative to who they are as a character than a descriptor that could be codified based on their race or what they look like. Does that make sense? I'm skipping this slide. Now I'm going to reveal a little bit, just a little bit. So in A Mercy, there's a character named Sorrow. Anyone ever read A Mercy? Nope, just me loving Morrison the way I do. Okay. Well, I'm gonna tell you right now. There's a character named Sorrow, and there's a character named Blacksmith. Got it? Okay. Because A Mercy is not considered one of the trilogy novels, does that make sense? Scholars did not see the naming and the renaming. They missed it. Does that make sense? Okay. In Paradise, we get the clues. Who were these women who, like her mother, had only one name? Patricia is speaking in the chapter named Patricia. Celeste, Olive, Sorrow, and the names go on. Do you see Sorrow's name in Paradise? Good job. I did too. And it's only mentioned one time. That's all you need though, right? Okay. Who are these women with generalized last names? Brown, Smith, Rivers, Stone, Jones. Got it? Yeah. Women whose identity rested on the men they married if marriage applied. And if marriage applied, it's very intentional, because marriage was also illegal unless you came from the same race, and if you belong to a race where marriage was legal. Is that correct? Yeah? All right. So I prefer to use the term coupled. When they're coupling, it then becomes easier to locate the genealogy. All right, I'm going to show a chart, and I'm going to reveal as much as I can. Here we go. What is going on? It doesn't want me to open it? Yes. Oh, just go to Word? Is that what I need to do? Okay. I had a link too. Okay. Okay.
Wait a minute.
Okay. Okay.
And share the Word document. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Yeah, a lot of them going to the here. Oops.
Starts at 11:30. Most of them.
Wait a minute, what's the other document? It's a Word document. Oh, okay.
Oh my God.
No, I had it.
I believe you. Maybe you got to file again, and then
Here it
there
is.
Okay.
You know why? Because it was okay.
Oh, I see.
I know what I did.
Okay.
I,
Thank you
I,
for your patience.
I did it on.
Oh no, it did not transfer.
No, here it is.
Okay. Thank you. Hi everyone. Okay. Uh. Oh.
You can see it online.
Okay. Good. All right. It didn't transfer well, but it's okay because I'm also holding several things close to the chest. And I'll explain that. um, this is why I was trying to use my computer. I didn't understand the depth of the technological opportunities, but I came prepared just to move.
Okay, now they can see it.
Oh, good. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for handling my voice. Okay, this is too small for me. I don't know. I have graduated to none of my symbols showed up. Okay. Yay. Okay. The image is important to me, so the image did not transfer as much as I would like it to, but that's okay. All right, so I'm gonna just kind of do a preview because I'm holding a lot to the chest. My this publication is coming out with Routledge Press. The process, the final submissions, etc., happens during spring break, but the publication comes out in the fall. Does that make sense? With Routledge Press. So I have to hold some things to the vest because I am an LTI here at GSU. I love my students, but my schedule is a little bit more devoted to teaching my students than it is to having time to write. And when I'm saying it in that framework so that you understand that there are scholars who are Morrison scholars who have a lot more free time to write. Their percentages are dedicated to writing is higher than it is dedicated to teaching. Does that make sense? And they have a different balance than I do. And nobody taking this away from me. Okay, so I figured out some things that I'm excited about, but I wanted to share as much as I could. Does that sound cool? Okay, so sorrow we kind of talked about. There's Hallie and May. This would it be even more effective if you had the opportunity to see the yellow pad paper with the handwritten tree. Do you see where this coincides? You would have seen the names. Okay. Faustine, the dot is supposed to be an image, but the dot means their name changes. The check means they're in that novel and their name's the same. Does that make sense? Okay. Patsy, the 30-mile woman. Howard. I'm naming mostly characters from Beloved because I know it's the most prolifically read. I'm naming Amy Denver. Absolutely, I believe she's in paradise. It does not work. It's not a streamlined Western concept in understanding and translation. Okay. And here's part of the why. For why I believe Amy Dimmer is possibly in paradise. That's how I'm going to word it. The first line in the novel Paradise is they shoot the white girl first. And Amy Denver is the only white character that has agency in Beloved, and Amy, the name means beloved. So I know I'm not insane, right? Something's there. Fruit is extremely important because fruit is the reason, fruit is the nail in the coffin. Fruit, boom, understood? And so while I was preparing for this and still writing, I realized fruit was in love this whole time. But you would have seen this on the tree. And then you would have had like this whole aha moment. That was like my plan for you to be like, whoa, okay. Toni Morrison wrote this down, okay? Does that make sense? All right. And I can't show you the image, though I have it, that's on the Pieces I Am, because Princeton has rules about it. And the updated version of it sounded like legal jargon I could not afford to get into. So I was going to show you from the Pieces I Am so that it looked legit. Is that fair? Okay. I don't need... Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good question. Okay. But I can't prevent people from online from doing it. So it's the risk. No, but it's okay. No, it's okay. Because it's coming out, and I'm getting to that. Because I'm wrapping it up, but it's coming out. But I'm getting to that. Does that mean you take pictures? I'm going to allow you to take. If you're a GSC student and you have no intentions of writing a Toni Morrison article in the next 6 weeks, you good. Is that fair? Like, please don't beat me to it, right? I'm over here, like, trying to breathe. I'm, like, really working through this. Okay. Celeste, or Celeste, and Celestial. You gonna make me think that's not the same person? All right. Is it starting to make some sense? Okay. Patsy's a nickname for Patricia. I'm gonna just let you think about it. And I'm just giving the little breadcrumbs I can do. The blacksmith, literally, his occupation is blacksmith. Okay. Making sense? All right. I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint and maybe we can all see it. Yes, Queen. Okay, we're gonna.
Just so you can share it with the
Yes, with the.
audience.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can share.
I have an in-person ticket. Let me tell you. This.
And then,
I'm having all my stuff now.
yeah, which were you here?
Oh, no, it's okay. I'll find it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sean. All right, angels. Here we go. I like to say angels in the outfield. Poets love illusions. So does Toni Morrison. Okay. All right. So, here we go. I'm gonna do it just like this. All right. So, and I'm wrapping, and those who can fill later, I'll have like 3 more sentences I can add. Okay. So this slide, I'm not supposed to do that. This slide is an amalgamation of text devoted to Toni Morrison's canon. The beautiful photograph there is a friend who I never got to meet in person. She passed away before we announced what COVID was. So we know, but she is the creator of the Toni Morrison literary. Thank you so much.
I can
Bless
turn
my
this
heart.
so it can. Oops.
Perfect. No, it's fine.
touched
Thank
the
you
screen.
so much. I was struggling. It was real. Carmen Gillespie, Dr. Carmen Gillespie. And I am not going to be, because no one wears going to be's or just tries. Okay? I will be writing the next Toni Morrison companion. Period. and I will be dedicating it to Carmen Gillespie. Sorry. And she is also a comic con poet who was a Morrison scholar, and we did not get to meet in life. So, all right. So Toni Morrison is also on a stamp. So when you visit the post office, please stick her on some of your packages. And that is going to be kind of where I ended. If people have questions, I know I went a little over for technological reasons, and my apologies. So it's open for questions. Yes.
This is so interesting because I haven't read Toni Morrison and I will.
Mm-hmm.
I did this with Yolanda Harris.
Mm.
And I got to meet him, so I understand it when it's just different.
It's very different.
And I got to read all his books, and I remember like Basil.
Mm-hmm.
He's in the first novel, but he's in the last one as well.
Right.
You get the bottom line, so I understand. Like I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. So I understand where you are.
Yes. Elin Harris was on the board for Hurston Wright, which is the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation, which was the first writing retreat that I ever participated in.
Oh, wow.
So yes, Elin is much
Super,
love.
super sweet.
Absolutely. Questions? Please don't be shy. Please let this. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be checking on the computer.
We got you, Chip.
Oh, praise be. Quiet as kept. Yes.
So
I'm
Yes.
really interested in the part that you said for quantum physics.
Mm-hmm.
Times. So where that means Toni Morrison, like where can you go to find out?
You can go to the publishing house that is going to accept my proposal for this, and you can go to the Black Quantum Futurism website. Rashida Phillips has a brand new book out on Black Quantum Futurism. I have also not, and I'm using the pronoun she, under the understanding of an assumption. I have not met them in person yet. But I stalk as much as I possibly can. It's positively. I like to do positive. I like to take negative terms and put positive spins on them. So stalking is making sure that I can read whatever they are working on. So anyone in that collective, Black Quantum Futurism, for sure. But I loved physics. I finished math and science early, and actually planned on majoring in physics pretty early on. I was an all-around nerd, like just like every like nerd checklist. That is me. And so what had happened was, I made a switch and thought that because in science things are constant, there's a rare moment where you'll have a new discovery or a new law. There's less creating new. At the time when I was being told and introduced about how things work as a concept in making a career choice decision of passion, if that makes sense. Not that what I'm saying is that is the way it is always. I'm not saying that, but that's how it felt to me. Like I would never be able to like have a new discovery. And literature has a lot more freedom, stretchy spider web, if you will. It's more, you get more of an opportunity, I think. So the scientific way of thinking plays a lot, in my opinion, to my innate ability to be aware of some of the moves that are being made and created by Morrison. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. No one has any other questions about this. No one even wants to ask questions they think I won't even answer, like specifically who's related to who. I was fully prepared to show the genealogy that I have in progress so that you can see some of it on the screen, but that was a little bit too cumbersome to kind of do. But you are more than welcome to send me an email and invite me back, because this is exciting, especially when you're the nerd in a group of really cool nerd friends. You know what I'm saying? Like you know what I mean? Okay. And they were all like, "You're nuts. You're so weird," but in this loving way, right? Like now, sweet girl. You keep trying, and they are so excited for me. Like your nerdom works out. We're so thrilled, So yes, your nerdom. Yes.
This isn't a question or a comment.
Yeah.
But, this is, Thomas Wilson does this in his, plays.
Yes, and they were friends.
Yeah, and this is something that I think you've been on that is quite common, especially in folks who narratize their works. So this is great research. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, I appreciate it.
More about this from other authors, especially Black authors and other ethnic authors and all of that, because it's so rich. So
it is absolutely tradition, for sure. I mean, Gloria Naylor does it. She has a trilogy. There are several authors who have trilogies. But what's interesting about like what you're saying, not only is it in the tradition, I told you I'm a nerd. I'm like totally quirky. What happens is because the scholars have been literally looking for what makes it a trilogy and can't find those key components of genealogy, through line of the story. It is a through line. It's an odyssey. It's absolutely an odyssey. And the clues are all there. 60 million and more. No one is going to be forgotten. These are epigraphs, and Morrison has said these things in interviews, in live performances, and when I had the opportunity to meet her, my goal was to have this figured out before I met her in 2015 with the publication of her last novel. But I did the best I could. I was like starting something, and that was beautiful enough in itself. So it is really important that I want to talk, and because I'm a poet first. And I think that also contributes to how I see things, my love for sciences and creative work. And because she starts with the image, I see things a little differently. And I think it's cool to be able to honor that in a world that is highly saturated but highly intelligent, highly capable, highly prolifically published scholars on Morrison and her oeuvre in a way that is, they're like, who that lady? How about who that lady? Right? And that's why I brought The Color Purple with me. I speak in metaphor all day. It's really important to me to do that because Morrison says to do so. She critiques critics of her work and says that she needs more of them who look like me, who see things differently, to address new ways of seeing the work without the white gaze. So that's what I solely do when I write on Morrison. God Help the Child was a good start too. Her last novel, set in present day. There are recurring character names. God Help the Child.
Whose last novel?
Morrison.
That was her last?
Yep, 2015. Bride and Booker. Hannah and Olive.
Well, I think now I have. And I was afraid to tell her that I didn't read all of Morrison's. And I thought she stopped being my friend. But well, I don't necessarily need to be seen, but I just wanted to say thank you for coming out. I actually have all of these on my shelf.
Great.
I may have to go back and read Beloved again.
No, don't start with Beloved.
Don't start with Beloved? Okay. All right, that makes things easy.
Because that's a good question. If you really want to see it, this is how you see it. You start with A Mercy.
Okay.
Then you read Beloved. Okay? Then you read Jazz. Actually, then you read Love. Then you read Jazz. And then you read Paradise in the order that I would tell you. if you send me an email.
Okay.
And that's real talk. Because when you take Paradise out of the publication chapter order and you rearrange it into time, space, and the African cosmogram, Black quantum futurism order, like sequence of events in time, oh my word, it doesn't turn into the stickler of the most challenging novel I ever read in my life. It just opens completely up.
So say that order again. That's a mercy first.
A mercy, because that's the prequel to Beloved.
Okay, so mercy and then jazz.
A mercy.
We'll go back to Beloved.
A mercy. I didn't bring jazz.
All right.
You want to do a mercy? You want to do jazz? Beloved used to have a cover. And then you want to do Paradise in the order in which. Beloved. Okay. All right. But if you're because it's hard for them to see if I I'm gonna try to write on the board. I don't have a slide for it. I didn't think, but I can tell you that to email me, because the order that I have for how to read Paradise, I've only tried it twice. Once with a group of students and then the second time with my personal self. I don't know that I'm fully committed to it yet. I want that perfectionism in me. But I will tell you, you have to read it out of order. Because I will have a chapter on how to read Paradise. Because literally, I have a system. Like this is not how normal people read. Like there's a code. Because when I read, I see things differently, and I honor that. I don't shy away from that. I understand my neurodivergencies. I accept them. If other people are uncomfortable, that's a you thing. Morrison's been saying that forever. So, quiet is kept. I hear things when I read. I see colors when I read. I'm not the only person on the planet that has that ability, but I use it for understanding. Yeah.
Did you say your email out loud for everyone?
Yes. Okay. So GSU account email is first initial Y, as in Yolanda. Last name is Franklin, like Benjamin or Ruth Kirk, at gsu.edu. My public email address is also my name, Yolanda, like Adams, middle initial J, dot. Last name Franklin, again like Benjamin or Ruth Kirk, at gmail.com. Gmail. Mm-hmm.
So,
You said your issue is why Franklin and GSU.
Mm-hmm.
and please scan the survey code, and so I just want to ask you which presentation. So choose Sleight and Tetralogy of Toni Morrison, and please.
Yes, please give feedback. I really appreciate everyone's presence. Thank you so much for having me
Yeah,
here.
so thank you.